are these people?
It's good to meet you, Akilé.
Thank you. Good to meet you both and excited to be on and just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing. So
No problem. And actually, I want to talk to you more about that in terms of you're doing the thing that we've kind of talked about on this show in terms of, especially in terms of organizing around movements. And I think especially for you being literally the media arm of your organization, I want to get a little more into that. But can you just share with us, your origin story? Like, how did you get to be a part of this movement? Because I think even in of itself, that's very interesting.
yeah, it really starts back even before I was a thought in anybody's imagination. And I say that because I was born in this small town called St. Petersburg, Florida. And this town is also the birthplace of Chairman Amalia Shatella. And not just the birthplace, but the organizing grounds for much of the work that would birth, what became the Uhuru Movement. And so his leadership and just his imprint, on the whole African liberation struggle here in this city had, just spanned generations. And so in 1966, Chairman Amalia Shatella, as an organizer of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, he, snatched down this white nationalist mural that hung in the city of St. Petersburg City Hall. He snatched it down and, faced a 5-year prison sentence for doing this. And so this is the political terrain, the ground, if you will. And so in 1996, that was the year I was born, October 22nd, not to, to throw things out there, but and 2 days after I was born, the St. Petersburg police killed an 18-year-old by the name of Tyron Lewis, an African teenager. And the city went up in flames. This community rose up in a fierce rebellion that spanned 2 dates, October 24th and November 13th, when they announced a non-guilty verdict for the killer cops. The community was going to meet at a regular community meeting, and the city of St. Pete, the police department, and neighboring police institutions descended on this community on November 13, 1996, and they attacked this building, much like we were attacked on July 29th, 2022 by the FBI, using every ounce of tear gas that they had in the city. They tried to assassinate Chairman Amalia and leaders of this movement by trapping them into the building and setting the building on fire. And this community rose up. So this is, the era in which I was born. And
right.
And the reason I had this relationship and even awareness of the Uhuru Movement was because my father was engaged in that struggle. He was connected to the Uhuru Movement. He was 12 years old. And so he was on the front lines of the rebellions at that time in 96. And so, just everything that, he learned in his organizing work, that was naturally something he extended to, his children. So
right.
At 14 years old, I think is when I really started getting active, just really getting a better sense of and adopting the worldview as my own, of the Uhuru Movement as my own. And it was helping me to understand things happening in the world, even growing up in that very confusing time, I was performing, writing poetry, resistance poetry at events, going to community rallies and at protests and demonstrations that the Uhuru Movement was hosting. And it was after the murder of Mike Brown in 2014, where I was, just at a point where I was like, okay, I can't not do something about this. Like, I know why this is happening. I have, the benefit of that explanation already. And so after high school, I was 18 years old. I graduated and I joined the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru Movement, and never looked back. So,
right.
Yeah.
That also led to you running for city council when you were 21, I believe. So given your kind of what you shared in terms of your background, that makes sense to me as far as that would be a logical thing for you to do, although people might say you were young. But what led you to wanting to go for city council? And then, what was that like? And yeah, share what was that like in terms of you doing that and the issues that were surrounding that.
Yeah, actually I was 20 years old when I first ran for office in 2017, maybe like freshly 20. And I it wasn't a decision of my own to like run for office. I didn't wake up one morning and go, I have aspirations to run for office. That was never a thought that popped up in my head. Like many politicians who think, oh, I'm so wonderful, I'm just going to run. So this was not something I intended on doing or I ever saw for myself. But as a member of the African People's Socialist Party, we, the chairman had been struggling, and this wasn't something new to us in terms of our organization, despite us not being a reformist organization or organization that necessarily believes that the electoral process is something that can win our freedom as Black people. We certainly didn't vote our way into this situation. So,
right.
We understand that voting is not necessarily the way in which those circumstances end. However, it is an area of struggle where our demands and the struggle for the democratic rights of Black people could be upheld and people could unite with and could support it because it's happening through a quote unquote legitimate form of political struggle. Right. So this is something that the chairman, had been working, this process of using the electoral arena to advance the struggle of Black people, to put the agenda for Black people and Black power back out there into the world. Because, we don't need to necessarily go into the whole history of the struggle for Black people in this country to even have the right to vote. But the fact is, that was a bloody struggle. I mean, Black people literally fought and died in this country for the right to vote, for access to, as a means of achieving political power. That's something that has to be understood. It's not just this right to vote, but it was a struggle for power that African people in this country were trying to gain, following the enslavement of our people, following the total strip of humanity and power from our people, and having experienced that, now being in a situation where we want to be able to speak for ourselves and work for ourselves and possess power over our own lives. So this is the transition into the struggle for the use of the electoral arena. And at a certain point in our struggle, specifically during the Black Power movement of the 1960s, we had a Black power agenda out there. This was what was being advanced, and we had leaders to forward that struggle. And as a consequence of this, the U.S. government initiated counterinsurgency attack on that movement, crushed the Black Power movement militarily, ideologically, crushed it. And then at this point where Black people are getting the right to vote, the Black Power movement has been crushed. So Black power has been taken off the agenda. Right. And so now, Black people have to vote for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and none of our interests have to be spoken to. And so you have this arena that's dominated by, the colonial bourgeoisie and the petty bourgeoisie, the white power and blackface, the people who work against us.
Right.
And so they dominate.
Liberal,
Yeah.
Yeah, the many faces. Yeah. And so they dominate that arena, but the chairman said we cannot concede that arena to them, that we can intervene in that. And so we have throughout our organization's history. And in 2017, which is when I ran, this was, part of that struggle. It was like, okay, this time is a ripe time. We can run, for office, and we can put this out there. So that's how we, came to the determination, okay, you're going to run. And our comrade, Jesse Neville, who's the chair of one of our organizations, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, we ran in tandem, and he is a white man. So we were running in a majority white city. So the strategy was that these two campaigns were working under the leadership of the Black working class, Akilé Anai, this is the leadership, and the white candidate, our solidarity candidate, is in unity with and in support of reparations and winning support for reparations to Black people from the white population of St. Pete. Right. So that's how I got into that, running for office. And that was our objective in that election.
Right. So in other words, so all of that just to say you didn't make this decision on your own.
Right.
So
No.
this was in tandem with your organization
Right.
that you were essentially selected to run for city council. So basically the chairman gave his blessing to say you will do this essentially. How did you feel about that? Like, obviously, given that you were in your early 20s, like, I mean, obviously you grew up within the movement, but I can also understand that must have been a huge weight on your shoulder. Or what did that feel like in terms of the chairman, essentially kind of bestowing that responsibility onto you?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly something that, well, first of all, like, honored to even be
Mhm.
somebody who was considered, somebody who, we're going to put you, forward. And now you have a responsibility, not to yourself, but to the people,
Mhm.
so that was certainly huge. And at that time, I honestly speaking, I can't say I recognize the magnitude of a responsibility like that, because even having grown up around the movement, it's a difference between being in organization and being in and following a discipline. And, and as you mentioned, age being a factor in this situation as well, just, being totally new to the terrain. And so it was very much development in hothouse fashion. It was like learning how to be an organization, learning how to be an organizer. And that, not to say that there weren't bumps and scrapes, and there was a lot of learning curves for me in that process. But because of the organization and the structure and just the principles of the organization, allows you to correct the errors, solve the problem, and do it better for next time. And I would run for office 2 years later, 2019.